رحم الله من قرأ سورة الباركة الفاتحة. Before I start, can I request the people move a bit forward? There's plenty of space in the front. And also, if you have cell phones, please switch them off. It can be a bit disturbing. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، خاتم النبيين، رحمة للعالمين بالقاسم محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله، صلى الله عليك يا ابن رسول الله. روحي وجسمي وأرواح العالمين لك الفداء، يا مظلوم يا غريب يا شهيد بأرض كربلاء. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وقوله الحق: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. خذ العفو وأمر بالعرف وأعرض عن الجاهلين. صلوا على محمد وعلى Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Those of you who were here at the very first majlis may remember that I defined the term diaspora, because I've been talking about Islam in the diaspora quite a bit. And it's important perhaps to redefine it for those who are not here. Diaspora means that which is scattered, that which is dispersed, away from homeland. And what I wish to talk about tonight, and maybe even tomorrow night, depending on how fast we can move, is what is called diasporic jurisprudence, which means basically the law, Islamic law in the diaspora, not in back home, but how do we apply Islamic law in our present situation? Because after all, Islamic law was formulated at a point in time in the 8th, 9th centuries when Muslims were in the majority. So it was assumed that Muslims were living in an environment where Muslims were in the majority. But here, of course, the situation has changed completely. And in many ways, the two terms, diaspora and jurisprudence, are contradictory. Because diaspora is that which is loose, which is fluid, which can change. Whereas jurisprudence or law, we tend to assume is fixed, is rigid, it cannot be changed. So in many ways, the two coming together creates a tension. On the one hand, there is change and fluidity. On the other hand, there is rigidity and stability. In many ways, this also highlights the dilemma of being a Muslim in America, that we need to be faithful to our tradition, our religion on the one hand, and yet to be able to integrate in a community or in a society which is very different. To put it differently, the dilemma of being in North America and yet not being of North America. We are in here, yet we are not of here. As I mentioned earlier, the olden laws were set up in a very different context. In this period now, in day and age, in the past few years, a new kind of fiqh has emerged, new kind of jurisprudence. It is called fiqh al-aqaliyya. Fiqh al-aqaliyya means the jurisprudence of minorities. In other words, those Muslims who are living as minorities as we are, does the same kind of fiqh which is present back home, does the same kind of fiqh apply here? When it comes to our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, yes, nobody is going to change the number of salat or the number of rak'ah in a salat. Subh has to be offered, yes, subh has to be offered. Although the timings will have to be rediscussed. Because if you are living in someone like in Barrow, in Alaska, where there is no sunset at all, in the summer and no sunrise in winter, then obviously what is sober and what is not has to change. If you are living in Fort McMurdo, which is in the Antarctica, again, your time will have to change. So although the essentials will be the same, that you have to pray, but when you have to pray will change. However, there are other aspects of our living that have to be re-examined, and this is what fiqh al-aqaliyya is all about. To date, this fiqh of minorities, as it's called, has been treated on an ad hoc basis. Ad hoc basis means that whenever there is an issue which arises, we write to a marja who will give us a response to that particular issue. When an issue, can we shake hands with somebody of the opposite gender, for example? Can I shake hands with a woman? Can a woman shake hands with me? And so on. When you write to the maraj, they'll say, well, normally not, but in the darura, when it is absolutely necessary. For most of us, we are living in zarura all the time then, because we end up shaking hands, let's face it, with the opposite gender pretty much all the time, most of us anyway. Other issues which have arisen continuously are, for example, again, if a person is a nurse, can he treat female patients or vice versa? Can we serve in the American military? If you are a judge, can you judge by non-Islamic laws in America? These are issues which were not there in the past. And the response has been on an ad hoc basis. There is no what we may call an integrated, a complete fiqh or risala. Let me be very honest, our risala, our treatises, our books, they do not treat issues which are germane and pertinent to us living in America. They don't treat issues like racism, for example, or the ecology. They don't talk about AIDS. They don't talk about the political system or homelessness and so on. Because these may not be issues in areas where they are written. Hence there is a clear need then to re-examine the whole issue of fiqh in the minority status. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. As I said, most of the scholars tell us in the zarura, or if there is a need, or there is no harm or a danger in Islam, so if you are in a situation which is harmful, then you can tweak the law a little bit, you can change the law a little bit. But that creates a minority consciousness, that we are living in a minority permanently, and somehow we have to isolate ourselves from the mainstream community. But today I think what I would like to do initially is to differentiate between Sharia and fiqh. This is an important distinction that many of us neglect. What is Sharia and what is fiqh? Sharia are those principles revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. Principles like honesty, like justice, like faithfulness, that nobody can touch. Nobody can actually change them because they are from Allah and they are eternal. These are called the Sharia, the general laws and principles in the Quran. Fiqh is the human understanding of the Sharia. In other words, comprehension. The word fiqh literally means to understand. And fiqh can and must change according to the needs of the times. So whereas the Sharia will not change, fiqh does change. All Muslims have the same Sharia, but we do not have the same fiqh. In other words, Sunnis, Sufis, Shias, Bohras, Zaydis, we all share the same Sharia. We all believe in the same God, in the same Prophet, in the same Quran. No dispute. But when it comes to fiqh, the Sunnis themselves have 4 schools. At one time they had 10. We ourselves have one school, the Ja'fari, but within our Ja'fari school, as you know, there's so many differences. Every time you want to do something, it depends on whose taqlid you are doing. And then there is the Zaydi fiqh, there is the Ibadi fiqh, there's the Bohra fiqh, Ismaili fiqh, and so on. In other words, whereas the Sharia is one, the fiqh is not. And fiqh can and must change according to the needs of the time. Because let us not forget, where you are from is not important. Where you are is more important. How do you live as a Muslim where you are? The fiqh is not written in stone, it's not carved in stone. Remember this much also, my sisters and brothers. Any law, whether it is Christian, Muslim, Jewish law, must be connected to the time and to the people. Because if a law is not connected to the people, that law becomes an ideal, not a reality in the lives of the people. It becomes abstract. People cannot relate to it. If you have a law which tells us things which we just cannot connect to, we'll say, well, what's the point of having that law? We can talk about it, we can almost worship it, but we can't apply it. And therefore, the law is always and has always, I want to show you today, been capable of change with the need of the time. This is what is called ijtihad. If we assume that laws cannot change, then we are totally wrong. Yes, as I said, the Sharia cannot change. This is our problem, that we mix up the two. So in English, when we say Islamic law, what we are actually referring to is not Sharia. Although everybody talks of Sharia in the West, because they do not know the distinction between Sharia and fiqh. When we talk of Islamic law, we're not referring to Sharia, we're referring to fiqh. And fiqh is humanly constructed. Because it is humanly constructed, it goes through changes and time. To give you an example, in the olden days, women did not own much land. And therefore, in our fiqh, it said that a woman cannot inherit the land. She can inherit the house. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think any house is constructed in the air. Houses are constructed on land. So I always say that in those days, maybe they were talking about tents or houses which could be movable. But in today's world, you cannot say that a woman can inherit this house, but not the land in which the house is standing. So where does she go? Where does she put the house? It's a now the scholars are re-examining that law. They said this was a particular law at a particular point in time. If you follow, for example, the fiqh or the rulings of Ayatollah Bojnurdi, not Burujardi, Bojnurdi, he very clearly states, and he's also on the website, that most of the Ayatollahs, by the way, rulings, etc., are on the website. He says very clearly that this kind of fiqh, as he calls it, is subject to change according to the needs of the time. Another example of how these laws have been and always have continued to be adjusted. The problem is not the law, by the way. The problem is us. We tend to think of Islam as very monolithic, as rigid and stable, and you cannot even touch it. If that was the case, then Islam would not have survived for as long as it has survived. It has always been flexible. It has always been open to change. I'm talking of the fiqh, not the Sharia. To give you another example, in the olden days, blood had no value. Blood had no value because there was no such thing as blood transfusion in the olden days. Therefore, it was haram to sell blood. You could not sell something which had no value. But today we know that blood can actually save lives of people. It is very valuable. And now our ulama said, yes, you can sell blood. Now it is okay, although many people would be uncomfortable doing that. But whether it is possible or not, yes, it is possible. In essence, what we are saying is the law has to be connected with the community, number one, and B, it has to serve the interest of the community. This is called maslaha. Maslaha means that which is in the interest of the community. If a particular law does not serve the interest of the community anymore, then that law can be changed. To give you other example, and I think we should get into the habit of reading some of these sources because they're highly interesting. My next book is on this particular topic, hence my interest in it. Ayatollah Muhakkik Damad raises this question of nafaqah. Nafaqah means what a husband has to pay to the wife for her maintenance, or alimony, supposing the two get divorced. According to the traditional law, and again traditional jurisprudence, the woman comes to her husband at the time of marriage. If there is a divorce, she goes back to the tribe, or she goes back to her parents or her brothers. The concept of a woman living independently on her own with being a single parent was unknown in the olden days. because she was always a property of somebody. Sorry to use that language, but this is how it was presented. She either belonged to the tribe or her parents or to the husband. If the husband dies, then she goes back to the tribe, or she goes back to her parents or her father or a brother who looks after her. Now, of course, things are very, very different. So now, therefore, Ayatollah Muhakkik Damat says that if there is a divorce, then the husband has to pay her not only her upkeep and maintenance, but all the amount that she sacrificed, her education, her job, her skills, in order to look after the children. After all, she sacrificed a lot of her time. She sacrificed her energy, everything, for the sake of looking after the children. And suddenly to assume that after she is divorced, she is penniless and nobody is there to look after her, would be highly unfair on her. This is what we mean by how Islamic law can be and always has been flexible. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Here I'd like to introduce a new concept that many of us may not have heard about. It may sound controversial, but it is not. For those who've studied Islamic law will know that it's nothing new at all. But for us, maybe because we have not been presented in such a way, we might find it new, which is the role of custom and law. Not only times, but what is called urf. Urf means custom. You've heard the term ma'ruf many a time. Amra bil ma'ruf. Ma'ruf is that which is commonly known. The word urf, custom, comes from the word arafa, to know. When Islam came, Islam did not start with a tabula rasa. In other words, you did not start with a clean slate. There were people living there before Islam, correct? There were Arabs living there. They had their own laws. Some of the laws were bad, for sure. But not everything was bad. Islam did not say that because we are here now, we're going to create a whole set of new laws. For example, there were those laws which basically advocated for female infanticide, which means that a baby girl, if you have too many baby girls, you kill them simply because they were a liability. Islam put a stop to that immediately. This is inhumane, unacceptable. But there were certain laws which were perfectly okay. So therefore, there were three main strategies that Islam adopted. One is called ta'sisi. Ahkam ta'sisi means laws which Islam instituted from fresh. These are laws of salat, laws of fasting. Most of the laws between us and God were established by Islam, because the Arabs did not believe in one God. They had multiple gods. They did not pray the way that we pray. And these are called the ahkam ta'sisi. Ta'sisi means those laws which Islam established. There are other laws that were rectified or changed a little bit. Ahkam islahi they are called, reform laws. In other words, there were certain laws that needed to be tweaked, that needed to be changed. Another example, in the olden days, the Arabs had two kinds of marriages. What is called the sadiqa and the ba'al. Sadiqa means the woman belonged to the tribe. When she got married, she still remained with the tribe, but she had conjugal relations with the husband, who would pay her a kind of a gift. Hence the term sadaqa or sadqa. Sidaq al-ma'lum that we use, not sadaqa but sidaq. When we recite the nikah, comes from this term here, which means that the husband would pay her something, but she still remained with her tribe. The other kind of marriage was the ba'al marriage, whereby the woman would move in with the husband, but the mahar was given to her father, not to her. The mahar that we normally give to the wife, and by the way, if you have not given it, please do give it, because it is wajib on you. In any case, I'm hoping the ladies are listening to this. But seriously though, the mahar at the time was given to the father. Islam changed it. It says, no, the mahar belongs to the woman herself. Why should the father get the mahar? And there were other laws with Islam tweaked. However, there was a third category of laws which were based on Arab custom and which Islam adopted, endorsed. Which means what? That Islam did not just come and create a new set of laws completely. There were laws which were not objectionable to Islam. These are called imza'i. Ahkam imza'i. Imza'i means literally to sign on. You know, if those who speak Persian will remember imzakun, means sign on it. To endorse it basically. So for example, the question of diya. Diya is blood money. When somebody dies, somebody is killed, then the family which is afflicted has two options. Either to accept blood money for it, or to ask that the killer should also be killed. This system Islam inherited and Islam okayed it. A lot of the laws regarding the guardianship of the child custody, etc., marriage issues were actually accepted and endorsed by Islam. They were not created new by Islam. What this means is this, that the local urf, the local custom was Islamicized by Islam. This is how Islam survived. In other words, Islam did not just come and say, because this is non-Islamic, therefore we are going to eradicate it and start with a new slate. As long as it did not violate the ethical framework, the moral framework of the Quran, Islam accepted those laws. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Rules of purchase and sale, of the discharging of debts, of limited partnership, and so on, were all accepted by Islam. When the Prophet himself migrated to Medina, the people of Medina had a special kind of transaction called the salam transaction. Normally, we are not allowed to sell something that you do not have. So for example, you have a tree, but you do not know what kind of fruits those trees will bear. Can you engage in a transaction of fruits which have not even been born yet? Islam says no. But when this was the custom, the local urf in Medina, the Prophet okayed it, provided it did not violate the ethical framework of Islam itself. So urf then, the local urf, the custom included the practices not only of Muslims, but also of non-Muslims. And what I want to drive at later on, either today or tomorrow, is that because the urf in America is different, as long as it does not violate the ethical framework of Islam, then some of the local urf can also be Islamicized, can also become part of Islamic law here in America, just as it becomes part of Islamic law in India or in Morocco or wherever Islam went. You will recall yesterday I was talking about the indigenization of American Islam. In other words, considering Islam an American phenomenon, not something which comes from the Middle East or from India. It's local, it's here. So part of that is absorbing or accepting American culture as long as it does not violate the ethical framework of Islam. Indeed, this concept of urf, of custom, local custom, is so important in the Quran that the Quran uses it no less than 38 times. 38 times. When it comes, especially when it comes to women. Because the thing is, the urf changes, customs change. So the Quran cannot come and say, this is the only way it has to be done and there's no other way. Because Islam was to continue until eternity, as the urf changes, Islamic law changes too. The Quran uses the term urf 38 times, especially with regard to women. To give you an example, in the olden days, many of you will remember who got married in Zanzibar and Dar es Salaam, we played around with the mahar, remember? Huh? Mahar ketla she bar shillings, you know, 12 shillings, to come 12 shillings, bahar imam she. 1,24,000 payghambar she. Nobody put $124,000 mahar, because we only played with figures when it suited us. But in fact, that Islam never established a figure of mahar, for the simple reason that the mahar was contingent or dependent on the needs of the woman of the time. As the needs of the woman change, as society changes, the mahar must also change. And therefore, if you were to give a mahar of 12 shillings today, the woman says, keep it to yourself. Huh? It will be like 25 cents or even less than that. Because it just devalues the woman. On the contrary, the mahar has to be that which is socially acceptable at the time of the marriage. Not something which is eternal, and you can't say that this is the amount of mahar and it has to be fixed eternally. Because of that, the Quran says, "Khudil afu," that forgive them, O Prophet. Always be forgiving. Wa'amur bil ma'roof, and give the command by that which is ma'roof, that which is the urf, that which is the custom. When the Quran talks of dealing with women, for example, it says that you live with them based on urf, based on what is proper in their times. And then it says, even if you can't live with them, do not taunt them, do not keep them hanging, to keep the women hanging. Some people do that. Many a time they want to create more problems for the woman, and therefore they will not give the talaq. They themselves can go and marry somewhere else, but they will not give the woman a talaq. So she is left hanging. It's called mu'allaqa in the Quran. The Quran says, no, don't do that. Either you live with them according to urf, or you release them according to urf also. You release them according to what is proper in that particular custom. Clearly the Quran is very concerned with urf. Urf then becomes an evaluative measure in Islamic law. To give you another example of how Islamic law is connected with custom. We may find this objectionable, but it is in our books too. At the time of the Imams, the mahar was normally given to the woman at the time of the marriage. That's when the mahar is supposed to be given. Huh? Half of it at the time of the nikah, and half of it before the time of the consummation of the marriage. She can literally, according to Islamic law, she can literally tell the husband, don't come near me, first give me my mahar. And she has every right to do that, by the way. I know I'm making a few men here uncomfortable, but that's exactly what Islamic law says. In the times of the Imams, the mahar was given at the time of the marriage. And therefore, if a woman claimed that she did not receive the mahar, the onus was on her to prove that she did not receive the mahar. Because that was the custom, that she would get the mahar. If she said, I did not get my mahar, she had to prove that she did not get the mahar. Now, later on, in the 14th, 15th centuries, the custom changed. The custom was that the mahar was mu'ajjala, we call it, delayed mahar, the way that we have now. Either in installments or on credit cards. I don't know how they pay them these days. Or sometimes later on, she says, when I ask for it, fine. She can do that too. But later on, if she claims that she did not receive the mahar, now the law has changed too. Because the custom has changed, now the onus is upon the husband to prove that indeed he had paid the mahar. Because now the custom was that the mahar could be and often was delayed. So as the custom changed, the law changed too. And in many ways, the custom determines the law. Some of the things that are being raised now were never raised before. But normally, as we are aware, the wilaya, the authority, the custody of the child goes to the father after a certain age. Again, this is based on custom before the coming of Islam. Supposing the issue is raised, I hope nobody does it, but suppose it is raised that a woman goes through a sex change, transgender surgery. The woman becomes, the mother becomes the father now. The mother becomes the father, so the child has two fathers now. Now the question is, this mother who changed her gender, now does she, because she is the father, literally, technically, does she have custody of the child or not? Because she's no longer the mother. The urf says that although she is a father, she actually is the mother. Are you following me? Because she has changed her gender, she still is biologically the mother, not the father, and therefore she does not get the custody. Similarly, the question is raised, if a person is on a life-supporting machine, can we turn, how do you determine what death is? Is that person technically dead or not? He or she may be in a state of vegetative state, where the brain is dead, but the heart is still beating. And the heart is beating because of that machine. How do you determine whether the person is dead or not? Here the ulama are divided, and again it depends upon urf also. Because according to Ayatollah Fadlallah, for example, he says that if the physicians say that that person no longer has a chance of recovery, that he or she will remain on that machine for as long as we keep on the machine, then you can switch off the machine. Because technically, that person is dead. Whereas Ayatollah Sistani says, what we determine death by what the urf says, what the local customs say. The urf will say that as long as the heart is beating, even though it is beating artificially because of the machine, that person is still alive, and therefore we cannot turn off that machine. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. It is very clear, and I hope that I've established clearly, Sallu ala Muhammad wa. That in many cases then, it is the custom which can determine the law. Consider this particular scenario before we go to the Masai, because time is running short. I know tomorrow is also a working day, but inshallah we'll continue the topic tomorrow. But consider this particular case. Supposing there is a young girl, and most of these seem to deal with women and marriage. Here's a young girl who's about 18, 19. She is capable of making her own decision. Can she then find a cool dude and get married to him? And what if the father objects? According to the old custom in the olden days, the wilaya, that is the authority, was always in the hands of the father, not the mother. Because as I said, the father always had the trump card. He was always in charge. Now things are very different. Now, according to, this is nothing to do with our law, it's between the Maliki and the Hanafi law, amongst the Ahlus Sunnah. Malikis were living in Medina. Look at the role of customs here. Medina was very Arab in nature, very conservative, Arab culture. Whereas Abu Hanifa was living in Kufa. Kufa was like Los Angeles, very cosmopolitan. You had the, the Mawalis, you had the Africans, you had the Persians, the Arabs, everybody in a mix. There the custom was very different. The culture was different. Abu Hanifa, based in Kufa, based on the local custom, he ruled that if a girl is what we call Rashida, which means that she is capable of making her own decision, then she does not need the permission of her guardian. It is good to get permission, but if that person, the one she wants to get married to, is on her own, what we call kufu, which means that is compatible with her, socially, economically, and religiously, then she can perform her own marriage without even telling her father. The same girl, if she was to move to Medina, the answer is completely different. Because Medina is a very Arab culture. And Malik ibn Anas ruled that even if that girl was 40 years old, 45 years old, even if she was 45 years old, as long as she had never been married, she was, to be very frank, a virgin. Even if she was wealthy, she had everything, yet she could not perform her marriage unless and until she got the permission of the guardian. Malik went even further. He says the father can perform her marriage without even asking her. He suddenly comes home and says, I'm already performed your marriage, without even telling her, without even asking her. This, of course, goes completely against the grain of what we believe, because you need the consent of the girl. But that goes to show, I think, the way that local culture often define the law. Before I finish and go on to Masaib, I want to show you that how sometimes these laws, which were based, they have nothing to do with Islam, by the way. They were based on local custom, as I hope I have been able to show, and we'll move on from there tomorrow. But supposing you have a husband who's gone AWOL. You know what's AWOL? Absent without leave. You don't know what has happened to him. Is he dead? Is he muttaying around? Has he just gone for a break? In those days, you didn't even have a Google to Google the jerk, There's absolutely no way of tracing. The question is, how long should the woman wait before she remarries? I'm talking of the amongst the Ahlul Sunnah again. Abu Hanifa, living in Kufa, says she does not have to wait very long. She waits 120 years. If he doesn't turn up after 120 years, then she can marry. I do not know about you. I've not even seen a woman of 120 years, let alone one whose dentures are falling out with a walking stick looking for a hubby. Huh? And Maliki says, no, she doesn't have to wait. Shafi says, no, 120 years is too long. She only has to wait 90 years. Because they were assuming that was a normal lifespan of a person in those days, that you don't have KFC or McDonald's in those days. So they lived up to 90 years and 120 years. But that clearly is against God's justice. One thing that I think that we should emphasize, and I want to emphasize again tomorrow, that Islamic law is part of, has to be part of God's justice. God is just. He cannot have a law which is unjust to anybody. Whether it is against Jews or Christian or a woman or a man, as long as Allah is just, the law must reflect the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because no law can be unjust to any gender, to any particular group, because of the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sallu ala Muhammad wa alayhi. My sisters and brothers, it is the eve of the 9th of Muharram. The heart yearns and cries out for those shuhada who gave their lives for Imam Hussein and for the cause that he was fighting for. Imam Hussein would often sit with Umar ibn Sa'd to the middle of the night, trying to find a way out of this dilemma. And Imam Hussein's stance was very clear, that leave me alone. I will not bother you. I will leave even the Arab Peninsula. I will even go to India if necessary. But I don't want to fight. Why do you want to kill me? Ibn Sa'd himself was accepting. He thought that this was a good solution. So he wrote to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad in Kufa, said that I think that we can avoid bloodshed. We should not shed the blood of the grandson of the Prophet. This is the solution that Hussein is coming with. And Ibn Ziyad, initially at least, he seemed to be inclined towards it too, until a person by the name of Shimr appeared. Shimr was in Kufa. Shimr read that letter of Ibn Sa'd, and Shimr said, this is a trick that Hussein is playing on us. If you do not get the bay'ah from Hussein today and now, you will never ever be able to get it. Either he gives you the bay'ah or his head. And Ibn Ziyad wrote this letter to Umar ibn Sa'd. And he gave it to Shimr. Oh Shimr, go to Karbala and take this letter of mine, that either you get the bay'ah or his head. When Ibn Sa'd read that letter of Ibn Ziyad, and Shimr brought that letter, Ibn Sa'd said to Shimr, I know this is your doing. You are behind this. See how people can change. This was Shimr, who was actually fighting for Imam Ali at Siffin. Shimr, who was actually the uncle of Hazrat Abbas. But here he is, ready to assume the command of the army if Ibn Sa'd did not act on this day. On the day of Ashur, Hussein first turns to Ali Akbar. It is a night for Ali Akbar. Only those who are the Sahibi Awlad, as we say, those who are parents will know what Imam Hussein, what Zainab, what Layla were going through at this particular point in time in Karbala. Because Hussein turns to Ali Akbar. Why Ali Akbar in particular? Why should he do the adhan? Because his looks, his voice, his demeanor, his behavior resembled the Prophet most. I think Imam Hussein asked Ali Akbar in particular, so that when these army were to hear the voice of Ali, maybe they would remember the Prophet himself. Maybe they would stop or not want to fight against Hussein. Ali Akbar was no ordinary son, by the way. He was also related to Muawiyah through Layla. Layla was the niece of Muawiyah. Our reports say that one day Muawiyah called his own people and he said, who is the best person to be the Khalifa? And people said, of course you, Muawiyah. You are the best person to be the Khalifa. And Muawiyah said, no, not me. It is Ali ibn Hussein, Ali Akbar. Because he has the best parentage. His father is a grandson of the Prophet. And on the mother's side, he's also from the path of the Banu Umayyah. But yet here we are, on the day of Ashur. Hussein is standing in front of the army, his enemies. He doesn't want to fight. He comes to them. He wants to talk to them. Oh, Shis bin Rabi', you told me, you wrote to me that the dates have ripened, the seasons have changed. Come to a people who are waiting for you. Imam Hussein called out the names of so many of those who wrote to him, but they were scared to approach him or say anything. On the day of Ashur, Imam Hussein took all those letters that they had written to him and he burnt them because he did not want his Shias to suffer after he died. Not only that, Imam Hussein pulled all the tents together and he lit a fire from the back of the tent so that the army, knowing these enemies, they would even come from the rear. As the battle continued, a time came when his companions died one by one in front of him. At the time of Dhuhr, as I was saying yesterday, 50 of the companions of Imam Hussein lost their lives in front of him. This was a major onslaught. This was not just an ordinary onslaught, a major onslaught. Fierce fighting at the time of Dhuhr. After all the companions gave their lives, Ali Akbar comes to him. Oh, my father, I want to give my life for you. Hussein says, have you talked to your aunt Zainab? She looked after you when you were young. Have you talked to your mother? Only Allah knows how Ali Akbar got permission from Layla, from Zainab. But finally, he comes again to his father. Oh, my father, my aunt, my mother have given me permission to go. Ali Akbar and Hussein. Hussein is looking at Ali Akbar and he says, oh Ali, if only you were a father, you would know what I am going through just now. Because this is not Ali Akbar who is going to go to the battlefield. A part of Hussein is also going to go to the battlefield. Haya Zadarana Hussein. Hussein takes his own horse, Lahir. He knows that he cannot stop his son anymore. He puts Ali Akbar on the horse. He hugs him and embraces him. Khuda Hafiz ya Ali. And as you go towards the battlefield, keep looking towards me, because I want to see you for the final time. As Ali Akbar is going towards the battlefield, he looks behind. What does he see? That Hussein is walking behind. Hussein is turning towards the sky and he says, oh Lord, oh my God, you bear witness that that son of mine is going to the battlefield, who in his looks, in his behavior, in his sound resemble your prophet most. Whenever I wanted to remember your prophet, I would look at my son Ali Akbar. Ali Akbar is coming to the battlefield. As he's coming to the Maidan, Layla calls the ladies according to some riwayat. And she says, oh ladies, I'm going to pray dua and I want you to say Ameen. As Ali Akbar is going to the battlefield, Layla goes on the musalla and she says, oh Lord, oh God, oh the one who brought Yusuf to Yaqub, bring my Ali Akbar back to me. I want to see my son one more time. Ali Akbar attacks the army. This was no ordinary attack. Our riwayat say that he attacked different segments of the army. The enemy were running away from him. Nobody could come near him. Ali Akbar at one point in time, he comes back to his father and he says, oh my father, if only I could get some water. I knock and ask, oh Ali, you knew very well that your father had no water. Why did you come back? I'm sure he came back because of the dua of his mother, and because he wanted to do his final ziyarat of his father, Imam Hussein says, "Oh Ali Akbar, take your tongue out. I will put the saliva of my tongue in your tongue." When Ali Akbar saw the tongue of Hussein, he says, "Oh my father, your tongue is even more dry than mine. Khuda Hafiz, oh my father, I will come back no more." As Ali Akbar is going again to attack the army, he attacks different parts of the army. Murrah bin Muqid says, "If that son, if that boy comes near me, I will kill him." Azadaran Hussein, as the army approaches Ali Akbar, this Murrah, he fires one spear which goes straight into the heart of Ali Akbar. Ali Akbar goes on the ground. Wa alaykas salam ya bata. "Oh my father, accept my final salam." At that point, Hussein, his vision was no more. He starts saying, "Wa Ali, Wa Ali, oh Ali, call out to me." Maybe Hussein is calling out to his father Ali, or his son Ali, who's lying on the plains of Karbala. Hussein, he approaches his son, Ali Akbar. "Ali, talk to me. Ali, talk to me." Hussein notices that Ali has got his hand on his chest. Hussein says, "Oh Ali, why have you got your hand on your chest?" Ali says, "Oh my father, the end of the spear is in my heart. I can barely see." But Ali Akbar, all our riwayat are saying that in his final moment before he passed away, Ali Akbar opens his eyes and he says, "Oh my father, I can see my grandfather. I can see my grandmother. They are telling me, 'Come to us, oh Ali.'" When Hussein tries to pull out that spear from the heart of Ali Akbar, Ali passes away in front of him. Azadaran Hussein, may Allah not show the enemy such a scene whereby Hussein is lying on the corpse, on the body of Ali Akbar. Zainab comes out. What does she see? That Hussein is at the body of Ali Akbar. Zainab comes out to the battlefield too. She throws herself on the body of Ali Akbar. "Wa Ali, Ya Ali." Hussein takes Zainab back to the tent and he says to the other ashab, "Go and bring the body of Ali Akbar." As Ali Akbar's body is brought to the tent, the ladies surround Ali Akbar's body. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي ماتم يا حسين
يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين